Welcome to the breakout session, Harmonization of Disclosure Requirements with DPM 3.0. My name is Alexandra Basarac, and I am the product owner for the Abacus Da Vinci module Own Funds, and today I will lead you through the topic of disclosure. What will I talk about? I will talk about the new disclosure, the disclosure modules of Abacus, the two major disclosure areas Own Funds and Credit Risk Quality, the mapping tool of the regulator, and finally, I will give you the actual information regarding our disclosure roadmap. So let me start with the new disclosure. In the past and still today, banks have to meet extensive disclosure requirements. In recent years, for example, the EBA has issued a new guideline for parts of the disclosure of own funds or for the disclosure of non-performing and forborne exposures. With these guidelines, the EBA has begun to standardize banks' disclosure reports by introducing supervisory disclosure templates, thereby increasing the international comparability of disclosure reports and market transparency. With the revision of Part 8 of the CRR, the supervisory authority continues along this path. Article 431 requires institutions to disclose the information referred to in Title 2 and 3 of Part 8. Article 434a requires EBA to develop technical standards for uniform formats of disclosure, together with appropriate clarifications. The final draft of this ITS was published in June 2020. The EBA ITS 2020-04 bundles the previous disclosure requirements, meaning the previous disclosure guidelines and various ITS in one technical standard. In other words, the ITS replaces the previous rules, templates, and tables. As always, there are exceptions. The disclosure requirements for IFRS 9 transitional regime remain in force. There's a separate ITS for MREL and TLAC, and various topics like the interest rate risk for the banking book, the indicators of global systemic importance, and the environmental, social, and governance risk will include at a later stage. With the new rules, the supervisory authority aims to achieve the greatest possible consistency between supervisory reporting and disclosure. In this context, previous disclosure templates like the CR10 have been adapted in supervisory reporting, and formats and definitions have been standardized. A further measure is the publication of mapping guidelines. In this accompanying document, a large number of disclosure templates are listed with their references to the corresponding reporting templates. Now I come to the Abacus disclosure modules. The new disclosure requirements will be implemented in Abacus in the already known modules, but in new template sets. For example, the disclosure of non-performing exposures and forborne exposures will become the disclosure of credit risk quality. Here the title of Annex 15 of the ITS is taken over. A new module is being developed for the disclosure of the net stable funding ratio. An overview is shown on this slide. As always, the EBA ITS contains tables with qualitative information and templates with quantitative information. Like in the past, in Abacus, only templates will be implemented, no tables. Depending on the size or complexity of an institution, institutions are subject to different disclosure requirements with regard to the scope and frequency of disclosure. As you can see on this slide, large institutions have to meet the highest disclosure requirements. The implementation in Abacus will basically based on the disclosure requirements for large institutions. This ensures that the requirements of the other institutions are fulfilled also. The concept has the advantage that all disclosure informations are available to other institutions. Maybe there's a disadvantage of possible longer duration of the disclosure processing, e.g. own funds. On the next 8 slides, I will concentrate on the two major disclosure areas, own funds and credit risk quality. With the new regulation of these areas, existing overlaps in the previous disclosure were removed and the disclosure requirements relating to performing and non-performing exposures were clearly separated from the disclosure requirements for own funds. On the slides for own funds disclosure, you can see the templates of the new template set, with the information whether the templates will be filled via allocation or form reference, or whether they are offered in whole or in part as a typewriter solution. The disclosure frequency for large institutions is also given. I will not present the templates individually, but I will give you an overview of the different groups of information. On this slide, you see templates for overarching information, templates which link accounting and regulatory information, and the template for prudent valuation. There are slides for own funds, counter-cyclical buffer, and the credit risk under the standardized approach. On this slide, you can see the group of templates for the credit risk under the internal rating-based approach. Additionally, specialized lending and equity exposures. Here you can see the group of templates for the credit counterparty risk. There are templates for securitizations. And last but not least, there are templates for market risk and operational risk. For selected templates, I will give you some more information. Template OV1 is an example for which mapping guidelines exist. I will come to this in a moment. The template KM1, with which the key information of the reporting area's own funds, leverage ratio, LCR, NSFR are disclosed, will be implemented in the template set disclosure own funds. The template LE1 is an example for which no mapping guidelines exist. The existing logic will be basically maintained. The templates SEC1 to SEC5 are already implemented in the actual template set market disclosure. They can be used for the upcoming disclosure under the new securitization regime as of year-end 2020. They will be transferred to the new template set. On the next slides, you can see the templates of the new template set disclosure credit risk quality. Most of the templates you already know from the non-performing exposure and forborne exposure disclosure. And now I come to the mapping tool. I will show you what the form references of the mapping tool mean for the implementation in Abacus Da Vinci. The first example is the template OV1, row 1, column A and B. The formula shows the calculation of total credit risk, excluding credit counterparty risk, for both the current and the previous disclosure date. The formula can be implemented either by form reference or by accessing the corresponding positions in the Abacus table allocated column. The next example shows the template CR5 row 1 column A. The reference shows exposures to central governments and central banks under the standardized approach to credit risk, which receive a 0% risk rate. Due to the conception and implementation of the template C07, it's a reporting template in Abacus DaVinci, direct access to the corresponding positions on the allocated corp is not possible. As you can see, for the position row 140, column 200, you can see in this position a formula, but you can't see any data. Therefore, an appropriate logic has to be implemented in Abacus. And now I come to the roadmap disclosure. In September and October, we started with the NSFR disclosure and published the draft software description of the first test version. Data requirements for NSFR disclosure are presumably not relevant due to the mapping requirements. The same applies to asset encumbrance. In November 2020 and January 2021, we will publish, on the one hand, the draft software descriptions for own funds, credit risk quality, and leverage ratio, and on the other hand, the draft data requirements. With regard to the disclosure own funds, there are no data requirements to date due to the mapping requirements of the regulator and the otherwise unchanged templates. The data requirements are only to be revised with regard to the new legal basis. From December 2020 to April 2021, we plan to publish the final version of the individual data requirements and software descriptions. In February 2021, you can see the delivery of the test versions for LCR, asset encumbrance, credit risk quality, and own funds. In April, the final delivery is planned, with the exception of the annual disclosure templates for own funds. With this delivery, you will be prepared for the first disclosure date, June 2021. Many thanks for your attention.